Essential variables explained. This is another attempt at a short video. Gary A. Pace, PE, CWI, May 2019. I'm going to try and do a short, concise, compact explanation of just one term, essential variables. I'm going to try and do it and keep it to a minimum if I can. So here goes. We only really have one key term and definition that I'm going to talk about. It's essential variable. An essential variable is a parameter that when changed outside its permitted range requires requalification. It's any condition change that could affect the quality and integrity of a weld deposit and would necessitate requalification. That's what an essential variable is. In another presentation, I'm going to talk about non-essential and supplementary essential. And it's not that those aren't important, because essential sounds, oh man, really important. Non-essential, you're like, oh, it doesn't matter. It's non-essential. Well, it is really important, but it just is something that when you change, you have to deal with it a little differently than an essential variable. An essential variable, if we change this, we have to requalify the weld procedure. And I've got a couple examples later on of essential variables that if you change those parameters outside of what it is listed as, you need to requalify it. QG 105.1 Essential Variables. Essential variables are conditions in which a change as described in the specific variables is considered to affect the mechanical properties of the joint. Before using a procedure specification whose essential variables have been revised and fall outside their qualified range, the procedure specification must be requalified. So it's telling us if you're going to do something that's going to affect the mechanical properties of the joint, you got to requalify. And these are essential variables. That's the difference between essential and non-essential variables. An essential variable is going to have a direct impact on the mechanical properties of the weld joint. And if you change these up, you need to requalify. That's an essential variable. So when we're talking about mechanical properties, two of the mechanical properties we're talking about are ductility and tensile strength. So if you're going to do anything with those essential variables, the codes and the people that write the codes look at it as, okay, you're changing one of these essential variables, it's going to do something that's going to affect the mechanical properties of the weld, which is going to be different, which means we need to requalify to make sure that the new essential variables, meet the code requirements and have the proper mechanical properties for the welded joint in question. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about mechanical properties. Overview of ASME Section 9, welding variables. So here we've got table QW253. We've got, if you go to this table, this is going to tell you the three different kinds of variables that are associated with this welding process. We've got essential, which I've outlined in red. We've got supplementary essential, which I'm not going to talk about on this video. And we got non-essential. But all three are listed. I'll cover supplementary essential in its own, and then non-essential is going to get its own. But they all come off this same chart. So you can see if it's got a little X by it, we need to address it as either an essential, supplementary essential, or a non-essential variable. My first example of a variable change would be P numbers. Under ASME, American Society of Mechanical Engineers, in their boiler and pressure vessel codes, they have a bunch of materials. They have a material list, and the materials that they say you can build things out of are listed as P numbers. So the first P number is carbon steel. If you switch, and let's say I'm building a pressure vessel out of carbon steel, and I want to switch from carbon steel, making that pressure vessel, and I want to use a different base material such as stainless steel, a specific type of austenitic stainless steel, which would be a P8 material, and I'm intentionally not putting in, A36 or a specific base material for, 316 stainless steel. I'm just kind of leaving this up in the air. Let's say I go from a carbon steel P1 material as my base material, and I leave everything else the same, the welding process, the filler material, everything, and I go to a P8 material, an austenitic stainless steel material. I need to requalify the weld procedure. There's a drastic enough difference in the mechanical, chemical, impact properties, whatever, between a P1 carbon steel material and a P8 stainless steel, austenitic stainless steel material. So the code says, okay, you've changed this variable. You've changed it. These two things are not even close to being the same material. You've changed from one to the other. You need to requalify a new PQR. These are essential variable changes. Examples. Here's another example of an essential variable. So if we were stick welding, shielded metal arc welding, and we had a welding process that was qualified with E6011, which would be an F3 material over here on the far left, and then we decide, oh, we're going to change and use a different filler material. We're still welding carbon steel to carbon steel, but we need to change the filler metal from 6011 to 7018. Well, because filler material, as in the F's, the F number, is an essential variable. So we've got to change from an F3 to an F4. So we need to go back and we need to qualify a new PQR, a new procedure qualification record to support our WPS. Or we could write another WPS. But the bottom line is we've changed an essential variable. We've gone from one type of filler material to another type of filler material, changed F numbers. So the code says, hey, that's a big enough change that you need to requalify a new PQR. You need to do a new PQR to show us and have proof that this new welding process where you're welding metal A to metal B with the F4 filler material, this E7018 pictured in the right, that this is going to work. It's substantially different enough that we need to requalify. So this would be an example of an essential variable. A WPS. What is a WPS? Well, a WPS is basically the recipe. We've done our PQR and we've come up with a recipe. We've already cooked the cookies once and everything came out good, and we know that if we follow that process, we're going to get good cookies every time. So with a WPS, we take what we did on the PQR and we make a recipe that the welders are going to use. It's just a work process. It's instructions. It's a recipe that tells the guy cooking everything, making the cookies, how many eggs, how much flour, how much chocolate chips, whatever. It tells him, hey, I'm going to weld this kind of carbon steel to this kind of stainless steel. I'm going to use this filler material. I'm going to use this shielding gas. I'm going to use this backing gas. This much preheat, or this is going to be my heat input. You're telling that welder everything that needs to go into that document to deposit sound weld metal into that joint. So basically a WPS is just a recipe. Not everything listed on a WPS is an essential variable. There's a lot of non-essential variables that could be listed on this WPS. But I just kind of outlined right here that this is a gas metal arc MIG procedure. But you can see where I outlined the filler metals. Here you would list the filler metals. Some of this information that I've outlined in red is an essential variable, and some of it is a non-essential variable. Like the size of the filler materials, non-essential variable. But the P number or the F number and the A number, those would be essential variables. And when you're reading these, sometimes it takes you a while to figure it out, but on a WPS, you need to list all the essential variables as well as non-essential variables. But key, we're talking about essential variables. All essential variables need to be addressed on the WPS. You don't have to use this formatting example. This is a code suggestion, but if you want to come up with your own and your guys can read it and your client's happy with it, run with that. What is a PQR? A PQR is the documentation that tells us when we did our science experiment that everything went right. So it would be like us, I guess my analogy here is with these pictures. You know, we're going to try and bake some cookies, and we start off with our ingredients. We bake some cookies, and then we write a report that tells how we baked those cookies. But when you're doing a PQR, a procedure qualification record, everything doesn't go right. And you can see sometimes you do a PQR and your bend tests might not go right. You might not get the tensils. And then we end up with a situation where the little potato guy is stabbed down there. But all joking aside, a PQR is just a document that documents our science experiment, what we did, what kind of metal we used, what kind of filler metal we used, if you're welding it to a code that requires positions. AWS D1.1, they want to know what position you're going to weld it in. ASME Section IX doesn't care. But you're going to keep track of all your essential variables and non-essential variables. Well, you can keep track of the non-essentials. But all your essential variables need to be addressed on the PQR. But that's what a PQR is it's just a document that records what you did in your science experiment and whether it worked or whether it didn't. If it didn't work, you're not going to use it and you're going to start over. But that's what a PQR is. So once we find out what our essential variables are, this is the document that we're going to record them on for the most part. You're going to list them on the WPS and the PQR. But the PQR, as I've explained before, is a document that supports the WPS. It's just the documentation that said we did the science experiment, we can bake the cookies, this is the first batch of them, this is how we did it. So when we're doing that experimentation to prove the process out, this is where we're going to write down our essential variables. There's little spaces in the form. You can use this format or another format, but you just record all the essential variables on the PQR. If you want to come up with your own format, that's great. You can also list here the non-essential variables if you want to, but it's not required. PQRs get all the essential variables listed on them. Questions, comments? Tried to keep this one as short as possible in regards to discussing essential variables. I'll do another one on non-essential variables and supplementary essential variables. Got any questions? You guys know how to contact me. My name is Gary Pace. I'm a PE CWI out of Katy, Texas. There's my website. Take care. GP out.